This call is now being recorded.
Okay. So in the last lecture, we saw a few random variables, few types of random variables. Specifically, we saw binomial random variables and geometric random variables. And as an application, we said we will look at this problem called the coupon collectors problem and see how uh, it is the random variable associated with this problem is a geometric random variable and analyze this scenario, right? So this is an example of a more general paradigm known as the balls and bins paradigm, where you have n balls and m bins, and if you throw randomly balls into bins, you want to know, you want to ask questions like what is the probability that there will be an empty bin, what is the probability that every bin will contain a ball, and so on and so forth, right? Those are the sort of questions that you're interested in answering. And coupon collector problem is one special in case of the more general balls and bin paradigm. Right? So in the coupon collectors problem, it's usually stated as follows: you have a box, say you have different boxes of chocolates or some objects, say chocolates, right? And each box contains a coupon, and you want to obtain all the different coupons, right? So there are an infinite number of boxes, but there are n coupons, right, distributed on in these boxes, and you want to get all the different coupons, right? And the only way you can get a coupon is to basically buy one of the boxes of chocolate. And if you buy a box of chocolate, then you're equally likely to see one of the n different coupons in that box, right? In other words, the coupons are distributed randomly among the boxes. So if you pick a box, then if there are n coupons, you are likely to see coupon number 1 with probability 1 over n. You are likely to see coupon number 2 with probability 1 over n, and so on. And the question is, how many boxes should you buy so that you can get one copy of every coupon, right? So you get a copy of every distinct coupon. How many boxes must you buy? So naturally, this is a random variable, right? Because it depends on how these, it depends on the coupon that you get when you buy a box, right? And since the coupons are distributed uniformly at random among the boxes, the number of boxes that you must buy is a random variable. And the problem is to analyze this random variable, right? What is its expectation? How likely is it to deviate from its expectation, right? Is expectation a good enough estimate for what actually happens in practice, and so on, right? And that is what we are trying to analyze now. Any questions regarding last lecture or this basic introduction? Right? We just basically discussed this and we didn't go much further than this, but any questions, any clarifications?
So I missed yesterday's class.
So yesterday there was no lecture actually.
Okay. Then
Right?
I
Yesterday
didn't
there was no
listen.
lecture, so that's why today there is a lecture, and yeah, so yesterday there was no lecture.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? So whatever I described is what we did on Monday. Yeah. Okay. So let's try to understand this, study this problem, right? So what we are interested in this random variable x, let's call it x, which is the number of boxes that must be bought to get one copy of each coupon. Once again, we will not analyze this random variable this way, right? We'll try to decompose this random variable into simpler random variables, and we will see, right? So suppose, say we start doing this. Suppose we buy the first box, then we definitely know that we will get a coupon, right? A new coupon which we don't have, which we haven't got before. Okay. So now suppose that you bought the first box, you got a coupon. Say it is coupon number 1. Okay. Now, how likely is it that you will get a different coupon when you buy the second box? There are n coupons which are distributed uniformly at random among the boxes. The first time you buy a box, you get a coupon which you have not seen before. Say it is coupon number 1. say you buy a second box, what is the probability that you will see a coupon that you have not seen before, right? What is the probability that it's not, it's, yeah, n minus 1 over n, right? So the first box always gives you a, gives a new coupon, right? Now the probability that, say, call this coupon 1, okay? Probability that the second box, the coupon in the second box is not equal to 1, right? This, as Pragyan says, is n minus 1 over n, right? Because there are n minus 1 different coupons, right? And they are equally likely to be distributed among the different boxes. So the coupon in the second box is not equal to 1 is if you pick one of those n minus 1 coupons out of the n, right? So now, so let's define this. Okay, so what happens? So say you picked up two coupons. So suppose you've done some number of you have bought some number of coupons boxes, and you've got say the first and the second coupon. Okay, so you've bought, so the first time you buy a box, you get a coupon which is, say, call it C1. Okay, coupon C1. And second, then you keep buying until you see a coupon C2 which is different from C1. Okay, now what is the probability that the next box that you buy is a coupon that is distinct from C1 and C2? It will be n minus 2 over n, right? So the probability that the coupon in the box bought after getting, say, C1 and C2, right? So what is the probability that this is not equal to C1 and C2, right? So now you have bought two coupons, you have two distinct coupons. There are n minus 2 distinct coupons still remaining. Now what is the probability that you will get a different coupon? It is going to be n minus 2 over n, and so on, right? So with this in mind, let's define this random variable, okay, called xi. Xi is the random variable which is the number of boxes bought after getting coupons C1 to Ci minus 1, right? Before you get coupon Ci, right? So xi is this random variable that does the following. Suppose you have bought a bunch of boxes and you have got coupon C1, C2 up till Ci minus 1. Okay. From that point, you look at the number of boxes that you have to buy before you get a new coupon, right? Coupon Ci. Right? So that is a random variable, and that random variable is called xi. Okay. So what can you say about xi? Right. So yeah, so what can you say about xi, right? That's what we want to say, right? And before getting into analyzing xi, remember that x is nothing but summation xi where I goes from 1 to n, right? Which is x1 plus x2 plus so until xn, right? The reason is that x1 is the number of boxes that you have to buy before you get the first coupon, which is 1. X2 is the number of boxes that you have to buy after you have seen coupon 1, the number of boxes you have to buy before you get a new coupon, and so on, right? X3 is the number of coupons that you have to buy after you have seen coupons 1 and 2. What is the additional number of coupons that you have to buy before you see a new coupon, and so on. Okay? So you just need to add these random variables, and that gives you the random variable of our interest, which is x, which is the total number of coupons that you have to buy before you see all the different coupons, or total number of boxes you have to buy before you see all the different coupons. And the reason we want to write it like this is because, once again, we can use the linearity of expectation to just sum this thing up. Right? So our job of analyzing x has reduced to analyzing the random variable xi. Okay? And the interesting thing, the main important thing to note here is how is the random variable xi distributed. Right? Understanding that is what we need to know. Right? So what we're going to see is that xi is distributed. So xi is a geometric random variable. Right? Because what does xi do? Xi says what is the number of trials you should perform before you get the first success. And the success here is defined as getting the ith coupon. Right? You've got coupons I1 to I minus 1. How many times do you need to buy a box before you see the coupon I minus 1? So the success here is getting coupon CI. And you want to look at the number of trials that you have to perform before you get success. Right? So what is the parameter of this geometric random variable? Right? There is a parameter p, right, for this geometric random variable. What is the parameter p? Yeah, probability of success is n minus I by n, right? So the parameter p is n minus I divided by n, right? Because you have so n minus I minus 1. Okay, so it's because you've actually you've only got 1 to I minus 1 and you want the ith coupon, right? So it is n minus I plus 1, right, divided by n, right? Correct? Because you've already collected I minus 1 you've already collected I minus 1 coupons. Now the probability that you get the success is the probability that you will get coupon CI, and that probability is n minus I plus 1 by n. So you know this is a geometric random variable with parameter p. Therefore, you can conclude with the analysis that you have done already, right? We don't need to do any calculation anymore because you've done this before. Expectation of xi is nothing but n divided by n minus I plus 1, right? Which means that I need to buy in expectation n divided by n minus I plus 1 coupons boxes before I see the ith new coupon, right? And so you can just substitute and see, right? So if you x1 is when you see the first coupon, and if you just work out expectation of x1 is equal to 1, right? Because if you put I is equal to 1, expectation of x2 is n divided by n minus 1 and so on, right? So it also makes sense, right? Because initially you have seen very few coupons. So if you buy a new box, you are likely to see a new coupon. Whereas as you go towards n, you would have seen a lot of different coupons. So the chance of finding a new coupon is less. Therefore, you need to do many more number of trials before you actually see the new coupon. Right? So that is captured by this equation. So this is in that way reasonable to understand. Reasonable. Sort of like a sanity check, right? So it makes sense in some sense, right? When you get some of these calculations, it's always is good to check whether the equation and the formula that you get actually makes sense, right? And this is some sort of a sanity check that you can do, right? So expectation of xi is n divided by n minus I plus 1, and therefore you can just write this value, right? So expectation of x is summation expectation of xi I going from 1 to n, and this is 1 to n divided by n minus I plus 1, right? So you can take n out, and so this is I going from 1 to n, 1 divided by n minus I plus 1, and this you can just rewrite, right? So this is you can just write the sum in a slightly different way to say this is k going from 1 to n, 1 divided by k, right? This is just rewriting. When I is equal to 1, then this denominator is n. So in this case, when k is equal to n, the denominator is n. When I is equal to n, this denominator is 1. So when k is equal to 1, this denominator is 1. So you're just writing the sum from the other side. Okay? And this sum we have already seen before, right? So this is the harmonic sum. Right? Correct? This is the harmonic sum, and therefore this number is n ln n plus theta n. So in expectation, you need to buy n log n boxes before you will see all the different coupons available. Is that okay? Any questions on this in this analysis? So you'll notice, so main point I wanted to emphasize is that sometimes when you analyze random variables, it's important, it's useful to know standard um, uh, PMFs, right? Probability mass function, so that you can just probably apply something directly, right? In this case, we're just observing that the simpler random variable which we use to analyze the random variable X is distributed as a geometric random variable, and so you can just use the same analysis, right? Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So once again, notice that this is not very satisfactory, right? Just telling the expectation at least is not that satisfactory, because you don't know how you want a high probability bound, right? So if you see the analysis of the initial randomized algorithms that we saw, we always said that, what is the probability that you need only so many number of boxes, right? That's typically what we want to know, and that is not given by this equation, by this derivation directly. Okay? So we'll see how to analyze that, but before that we will see a different analysis of this, which already tells you that maybe n log n is a decent bound. Okay, so let's look at the following analysis. Okay, let's just do the same thing, same coupon collector problem. Okay, so let ei, okay, so let ei be the event, let this be an event that the ith coupon was not present in the k boxes, in the k boxes that were bought for some k. Okay, so you buy k boxes. Let ei be the event that the ith coupon was not present in any of these k boxes. Okay, so what is this probability? What is the probability of ei? Right, you buy k boxes and you want to know what is the probability that the ith coupon was not present in any of these boxes. What is this probability? Yeah, 1 minus 1 over n to the k, right? Correct. Yeah, Sarthak and Shrikant. Yeah. What do you want to show? So what is the probability that the first box did not contain this coupon? The probability that this coupon was picked in that sample was 1 over n. So the probability that it was not chosen is 1 minus 1 over n. And this is, you just do this for all the k different. Basically, this is the probability that Ci was not the coupon in the first box. Right? Similarly, you multiply it because the coupons are distributed independently and uniformly at random into the boxes. Right? So you can just multiply them together. Okay. So this is nothing but 1 minus 1 over n to the k. Okay. And we will use our very nice approximation, right? So this is at most e to the minus k over n, right? This is e to the minus k over n, right? You can recall the approximation, right? So we know that this is one approximation that we'll constantly use, right? 1 minus 1 over n to the n is less than or equal to e power minus n, right? Sorry, is less than or equal to 1 over e. Right? So this is something that we use all the time. So now what are we interested in? So what is the probability that, so what do we want to know? What we want to know is the probability that at least one of the coupons was not present in the K boxes, right? So this is nothing but the probability of union of EIs, right? Where I goes from 1 to n. Right? EI is even that the ith coupon was not present. So the probability that at least one of the coupons is not present is the union of EIs. Okay? And we know this nice, right? We know the union bound which says that this is nothing but the summation of the probabilities of EIs. At most, the summation of probabilities of EIs. Right? This is what is called the union bound that we saw before. Right? And therefore, this is at most n times e to the minus k divided by n. Right? So the probability that at least one of the coupons is not present in the k boxes is n times e to the minus k divided by n. Okay? So if we choose, so k, you want to know what is the number of boxes that you have to buy, right? So suppose we choose k to be something like n, say 10n log n, ln n. Okay? Then this probability is at most n times e to the minus 10n ln n divided by n, right? So these n's goes off, and what you have is that this is something like, how much is this? This is 1 over n to the, so this is, sorry, n times 1 over n to the 10. So this is something like 1 over n to the 9. Okay. So this is the probability that at least one of the coupons is not present. And so the probability that every coupon is obtained is at least 1 minus 1 over n to the 9. Right? This is a fairly good bound. Right? It's the error, the chance that it will fail is something like inverse polynomial. Right? Inverse polynomial bound is decent. Inverse exponential is even better. But the only issue here is this number, right? 10n ln n is not very nice if you compare it with the expectation. Expectation says that it is n ln n plus theta n, right? This is slightly worse off than that. Okay. So for instance, if you choose k to be something like that, say you choose k to be n ln n plus say 10n instead of 10n ln n, right? Which is a slightly weaker thing, right? So typically you know that this is the expectation. What happens if you take so many number of balls? What is the probability? So for this k, what is the probability of union EI? This is at most n times e to the minus 10n plus n ln n divided by n. Right, so this is n times e to the minus 10 times 1 over 1 over n, which is nothing but e to the minus 10. Okay. So compare these bounds, right? Compare this bound with this bound. Okay. This is a very good bound, right? 1 over n to the 9 is a very good bound. It's inverse polynomial, right? The error probability decreases polynomially with the number n. Here it's constant, right? Irrespective, it doesn't depend on n. Okay. So it depends on the choice of the parameter, right? The number of boxes. We know that the expected number of boxes, something like n, it should be n ln n plus theta n. If you take so many, but the probability analysis that we're getting is not very strong for such a bound. Right? If you take, but instead, if you take 10 n ln n, which is slightly much larger than the expectation, then you get a slightly better bound. Right? So even though your expectation is n ln n plus theta n, the probability that you only have to buy only so many boxes before you see all coupons is not very high, right? The probability for success is something like 1 over 1 to the e raised to 10, right? So what so this bound, while it tells you that you only need to actually buy something which is close to the expectation, the confidence with which you can say it is not very high. It is only a constant, with constant confidence. Right? Whereas typically for a good confidence bound, you need something like inverse 1 minus inverse Pauli or 1 minus inverse exponential. Right? Our analysis is not giving us that. Right? This is not the problem of there being a gap. Rather, in this case, what happens is that our analysis is not tight enough to give the bound that we need. And what we are actually going to see now is how to improve this analysis and get stronger bounds. Right? A way to find the deviation of a random variable from its expectation and how to study that. Right? That's what we are going to do. And that is crucial to understanding and analyzing randomized algorithms that we'll see later. Okay. Any questions so far on this? Any questions on this analysis and what it means? Okay. All right. Good. So then let's move on to developing some more tools, right, to analyze random variables. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do, so notice that what we want to do is you have a random variable, you know how to compute its expectation, and then what you want to do is how much is it deviating from its expectation. Right? If I tell you that the expectation is 10, how likely is a random variable to take a value 11? How likely is a random variable likely to take a value 100? How likely is it to take a value 5? Right? These are the sort of questions that we want to answer now. And the first tool that we will see is a simple inequality, right, known as Markov's inequality. Right? So we'll see strengthening of these inequalities. We'll get stronger and stronger inequalities, but at the cost of certain restrictions that we have to place on the random variable. So let's see Markov's inequality first. Okay, so this says that let x be a non-negative random variable right, and let a greater than 0, then the probability that x is greater than a is less than or equal to expectation of x divided by a. Right? So you have a non-negative random variable and a is some number. What is the probability that this random variable will take a value greater than a? Right? If you want to restate it, okay, you can actually restate it if you want, in the following way, right? So you can say this as the following: the probability that your random variable x will be greater than some constant times its expectation is at most 1 over k. Not constant, it can be some number k, right? So this is the sort of inequalities that we want, right? You have a random variable, you know its expectation. How likely is it that the random variable will be far from the expectation, right? And that farness is what is captured here, right? You have a random variable x, you know its expectation is e of x. What is the probability that the random variable takes a value which is some k 100 times expectation of x? It tells you that it will be less than 1 over 100. Right? That is what this says. It's not very strong, but it still says something, right? So it cannot be, so no random variable can be too far away from its expectation. Right? So if you say what is the probability that x is greater than 1000 times the expectation, it is less than 1 over 1000 and so on. Right? So that is simple enough inequality. And the good thing is that this inequality is applicable to any non-negative random variable. Right? It doesn't matter what that random variable is. It can be binomial, geometric, you name it. Right? Any random variable, as long as it is non-negative, will satisfy this condition. Correct? Is the statement clear? Any questions regarding the statement? Okay. So let's see a simple proof of this. Okay. So to do this, let's define an indicator random variable. Okay. Let I be an indicator random variable. such that I is equal to 1 if x is greater than a. Okay, let's define this random variable, which is 1 if x is greater than a. Correct. So therefore, the expected value of this random variable is basically the probability that I is equal to 1, which is nothing but the probability that x is greater than a. Right. This is what we want to actually compute. Right. Now, we know that x is non-negative, right? Which means that I can say that I is always less than x divided by a. Right? Why is this true? You know that x is non-negative, right? So if I is equal to 1, this means that x is greater than a, which implies that x by a is greater than 1, right? Which is equal to I. And if I is equal to 0, then this means that x is less than or equal to a, right? And it doesn't, and since x is non-negative, right, x divided a by a is definitely greater than or equal to 0, right? This is because of the non-negativity of x. Correct. So I is definitely less than x divided by a, the random variable I, because it takes two values, 0 or 1, and if it is 1, then it means that x is greater than a, therefore x by a is greater than 1. If it is 0, then it is x by a is definitely greater than 0, right? Because x is non-negative. Right? So then the probability that x is greater than a, which is the expectation of I, this is less than the expectation of x divided by a. And since a is a constant, this is nothing but expectation of x by a. Correct. So the probability, so this is just the simple proof, right? It's a very straightforward proof, right? So the probability that x is greater than a is e of x divided by a. Correct. Is this clear? Is the statement clear? It's very useful in a lot of situations, provided the random you are not looking for too strong a bound, right? You're analyzing some randomized algorithm, and in some places you don't need a really strong bound, but you just need some good enough constant, right? So then this is very useful because it's applicable in all sorts of scenarios. You don't really care what the random variable is as long as it is non-negative, right? So it's useful in a very various situations, right? But still limited, right? It's not very powerful. It does not give you very strong bounds, right? The reason I say it's not strong is because of this factor here, right? It's just 1 over k. So if you want, say, even if you want to say it's a constant times the expectation, the error you get is just a constant. You don't get this inverse polynomial, inverse exponential, which is sometimes needed. Okay. So any questions so far on this inequality? Okay, good. So then let's you try to use this somewhere. Okay, let's try one place where we can actually apply this inequality to get a decent, good bound. So the first thing is, let's go back to the example that we saw before. Let's go back to quicksort. Right. So recall that what we saw in the case of quicksort was if you take x to be the number of comparisons performed by the quicksort algorithm, then what we saw was that the expected value of x is something like n ln n plus theta n, right? Was it n ln n, or it was slightly off? Yeah, something like this, right? Or I think 2n ln n. I don't remember the bound right now exactly. Yeah, 2n ln n, right? Something like this. Yeah. Anyway, n ln n for now. Okay. So if you use Markov's inequality directly, what you can say is something like probability that x is greater than, say, 10n ln n, right, is less than 1 over 5. Right? Because this is your a, right? This is like 10 times expectation of oh sorry, this is called this the a, right? And this is your expectation. Let's forget about the theta n for now, right? This is the expectation, right? So this if you just directly apply Markov's here, it will tell you that the probability that x is greater than 10 n ln n is less than 1 over 5, right? Which is not bad but not very good, right? Because 1 over 5 is not good enough. Typically we want much stronger bounds, right? When you want to prove when we want to bound error probabilities, we want really small error probabilities, not constant. Even try even better. Okay, so let's analyze quicksort a little better. Again, we will use Markov inequality, but use it in a very slightly more clever way. Okay, so let's go back to its analysis. Okay, so we'll analyze this slightly differently now. Okay, not as before, right? Our analysis is going to be slightly different. So let's recall quicksort. So what does quicksort do? So you have an array, right? You have an array, and you choose a pivot somewhere, right? Say here, right? And you look at the correct position that pivot should be, right? It might somehow actually be here. Say this should have been where it should be. In which case, what happens is you split this sorting into two subarrays, right? Where say this sits here, and all of these are lesser than or equal to. So if this number is this is the pivot, then all these numbers are less than the pivot, and you have an array here, and all these numbers are greater than the pivot, right? And then you recurse. Okay, so this array size was n, right? This array size was n. This has become smaller. Okay, this size is something less than n. Right? So you can draw this sort of recursion tree for the quicksort algorithm, right? Right, you can draw this recursion tree for this quicksort algorithm, and the running time of this algorithm is basically so you can write the running time as follows now. Running time is depth of the recursion tree times the number of comparisons at each level of the recursion tree. Correct? So look at the number of comparisons the first level. The number of comparisons the second level is the number of comparisons in the first part plus the number of comparisons in the second part, and so on. So the total running time is the depth of the recursion tree times the number of comparisons at each level. Right? So which of these is a random variable? Are both of these random variables, or is only one of them a random variable? Are both of them random variables, and so on? What do you think? Running time is a random variable, so one of these, at least one of these two should be a random variable. Are both of them random variables, or is just one of them a random variable? Both are random. Okay. Any other answers? Does everyone agree that both are random? So I'm talking about the number of comparisons at the level. So you have to look at the number of comparisons in this subarray plus the number of comparisons in the second subarray at every level, right? So this quantity here is not random. This is not random. This is not a random variable, right? The reason is that you always have to do theta and comparisons here, right? Because in the quicksort, you are going on both the branches, right? So say you might have to do, so if this array has size n1, this has n2, you know that n1 plus n2 is equal to n, and you have to do n1 comparisons plus n2 comparisons, right? So no matter where you go, at every level of this tree, this tree, you're still doing something like theta and comparisons. Correct? If you add up everything, that's what I'm saying, right? So now the question is, what can you say? So this depth of this recursion tree is what you're going to analyze now, right? How deep is this recursion tree? And to do that, what we're going to see is what is the expected depth. Okay. Let's try to do this. Okay. So let's for now, let's fix an element. Okay. Okay. So what let's do, to do this, let's do the following, right? Fix an element A in the array. Okay. And let xi yeah, you could say that. Yeah, you can say it is at most n, right? Because you're comparing it over all the sums, so it is at most n. Anyway. Yeah. In fact, what we are going to show is that if you take any element within log n steps, it will actually end up in a very small array, right? Which is of size 1. So for that, there is no comparison, or you can say one comparison where you compare it with itself or something. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So let xi be the size of the array containing A at the ith level of the recursion. Okay. So what is x0? At the 0th level of recursion, x0 is equal to n, right? The entire array. Okay, so at the first level, A is, you're looking at the entire array, so x0 is n, and so on. So we want to look at xi. Okay. So let's suppose let's do the following. What is the, so we're going to find the expected size of xi. Okay. So what is the expected size of xi if I tell you that xi minus 1 is equal to t? Right? So what this means is, what is the expected size of the array containing A at the ith level, given that at the I minus 1th level, it contained T elements. Right? Suppose I tell you that at the I minus 1th level of recursion, the array containing A had T elements. What is the expected size of the array when you go to the next level of the recursion? Right? So you are say here you are in some position, the array contains T elements, A is sitting somewhere here. Now you're going to choose a pivot and then you're going to split this array into two arrays. Right? One of them will contain A, or it might be here or here, either place it can be. What can you say about the size of these arrays? Right? What is the expected size of that array? Okay. So this we'll get a bound. We are not going to T over 2. Why is that?
Assuming like they are all distinct, there is like 1 over t possibilities for each value of size from 1 to t minus 1.
Okay. So then what is the value?
Yeah, so it's 1 by t times 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on to t minus 1.
Okay. So it is
Yeah.
T. Oh, just a minute. Yeah. So no. So what I'm not talking about this being pivoted, right? You don't know how these now what this array is. All you know is that it contains T elements, right? So with probability 1 over T, it will be, what is it that you're saying?
Yeah, so with probability 1 over actually like 1 over t minus 1, like around 1 by t or minus t minus 1, you get each split is equally probable is 1.
Okay, so that is so that the splits can go from 1 to
t minus 1.
1 to t minus 1. Each split is so if you have distinct elements, then each split is equally likely. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's how I got it.
Sarthak, is that what you are also saying? Yeah. So let's just write that down. So this is so what you're saying is that with probability 1 over t, so this is a t element array. So with probability 1 over t, A will be, so let A be in a particular position, right? Let A be some element. So with probability 1 over t, it will have size. It will not have size 1, right? Why should it have a size 1 array? It might be somewhere in the middle or something.
It may turn out that the pivot is just one larger than E.
Okay.
In which case, it will go down to size 1.
No, just a minute. I don't fully understand this. Okay. So you have this, say A is the largest element. Okay. So with probability 1 over t, you will have say okay, let's just write this down. Okay. Say you have this and say A is here. So if you choose this element, you're saying if you choose probability of choosing this element is 1 over t, right? And in this case, the size is 2, right? Or you can choose this element, in which case the size is 3 and so on. This is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Right? T minus 1, it can go this way. Okay, good. So this is with probability 1 over t. This is 2 plus 1 over t. This is 3. And so on till 1 over t. This is t minus 1. So let's try to do this. So this is this will be, the sum is something like t times t minus 1 by 2. Let's say this is like t over 2. Because the sum is 1 over t, 1 or 2 plus 3 plus and so on till t minus 1. Okay. And let's not worry about small factors here and there. So this is, we will say this is, say, t divided by 2. Okay. So this is the expected size, right? So it's reducing, it is going from t to t by 2. That is the expected value, right? So then, that's good. That's good. So what is the expected value of xi? This is what we want to find now. Okay, what's the expected value of xi? This is summation over the probability that xi is equal to t into the expected value of, xi minus 1 is equal to t times the probability into expectation of xi given that xi minus 1 is equal to t, right? This is something that we saw, right? Of how to get expectation from the conditional expectations. And this is for different values of t. And what is the expectation? This is t over 2. Okay, so this is something like t over 2 times summation over t. Oh, sorry, this is 1 over 2 times t into probability that xi minus 1 is equal to t. Right? And this quantity is, right, this quantity is nothing but the expectation. Yeah. Anyone wants to? Yeah.
So can you like explain why it's like t by 2 again? Like what if A is like somewhere, A is exactly in the middle of the sorted array? Like
A is in the middle of the sorted array. So let's see what happens if A is in the middle of the sorted array.
then like anyhow you partition, like the array containing A will have at least t by 2 elements.
Oh, I see. That is correct. That is good.
So
you're
I
saying
think
that
like expectation will depend on where A is in the array.
okay, that is very good. So if it is here, you're saying that even if you choose this element, there'll be at least t minus 1, right? And even if you choose, say, there is no way that you can get an array where A size is just 1, you're saying, or 2, for instance. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, there is no way to get an array where A size is less than t by 2.
Okay, that's good. So then there is some problem with this analysis, right? So that's a good counterexample. Let's try to analyze this again. That's a good counterexample. Good, that's good. So how do we analyze this then?
I think like we can fix the position of A in the sorted array.
Okay.
Call it some k, then analyze for that, and then do some.
Okay, and then you look for different case.
Yeah.
Okay. So it'll be possible to do that, but the only thing is it might make it very complicated, right? Because first of all, you can't assume anything about whether it will be in position 1 or 2. That there is no probability. That's like a worst case bound, right? You can't say that with probability 1 over t it will be in the first position, with probability 1 over t it will be in the second position, and so on. For A, you cannot say anything, right? A could be a worst case input, right? You can't assume anything about where A might be positioned. So that analysis, probably the first thing to try, is a little complicated. I don't know how to do it exactly, right? What we will instead do is, we don't really care about the exact value, but all we really need to care is some sort of a bound for this quantity, right? Right? We just need to know some sort of a bound for this quantity. So what happened? So let's suppose we choose a random pivot. Okay. One of the two things can happen, right? So what is the probability that the pivot partitions the array into parts of size 1 over 4, 3 over 4? Say you randomly choose a pivot. What is the probability that the parts are divided to say 3/4 over t, 1/4 over t? Right, so sort of equal partitions. If you randomly choose a pivot, irrespective of the position of A, right? I mean, I'm just asking how large the parts can be. What is the probability that the parts are of size 3 over 4, 1 over 4? If you randomly choose a pivot.
1 over t, right?
1 over?
T.
1 over t. Why is that? 1 over t?
Like if you randomly choose a pivot, then all possible length, the sum of lengths is equally probable.
So I'm just looking at this thing. I want so here I'm choosing a pivot, and I want the probability that the pivot partitions the array into parts of size 3 over 4t, 1 over 4t. Right? So if you choose one element, it's 1 over t. Then what was the argument?
So basically, after partition, let's say the sizes of the arrays are some x and t minus x.
Okay.
Then every x is equally probable if you choose the pivot randomly.
Exactly. But I want something between 3 over 4t and 1 over 4t, right? It should be partitioned that way. So not exactly 1. So what I'm saying is that, so maybe I should, so what you said is right. So let me just reword it slightly. I want to get partitions the array into two parts, A1, A2, such that the length of A1 is at most 3 over 4t and is at least 1 over 4t. Similarly for A2. Maybe I should have said it this way. What you're saying is correct. I think what Indranil is also written is correct. But this is what I want to say.
So this will be probability halves.
Yeah. Yes, this will be probability half, right? Because of the same reason that Raghu and Indranil were saying, right? Because if you fix the partition size, then there is exactly one element that will partition it. Now you want the partition size to be somewhere between 1 over 4t and 3 over 4t. There are t over 2 such elements, and therefore, if you're equally likely choosing any of the elements, and therefore, with probability half, this will happen, right? So now, let's write this expectation once more. So this expectation, I can say it as follows. With probability half, right, AI will be in, the element A will be in an array of size at most 3 over 4t. Right? Because with probability half, both the arrays are of size at most 3 over 4t. Therefore, A is also will be in an array of size at most 3 over 4t. Or with probability half, A will be in an array of size t itself, right? It has not shrunk. Maybe t minus 1, but let's put t for now. Right? So what this means is, with probability half, array has shrunk to size less than 3 over 4t. Here, it's a bad pivot, right? This is like a bad pivot. No reduction in array size. Maybe it has reduced, but we can't assume anything. Right? It's not saying that there is no reduction, but just that we can't assume. It could be a worst case reduction. It might just be t minus 1, for which we have put just t there. Is this equation clear? Right? With probability half, you're actually going to shrink the array, or with probability half, you're not going to shrink the array at all. And this gives you what? This gives you, right? This tells you that this is at most 7/8 t, right? Is this clear? Any questions on this? Okay, good. So this is 7/8 t. Good. So now let's do the calculation again. Let's calculate expectation of xi. So what is expectation of xi? This is summation over the values of t. Probability that xi minus 1 is equal to t times the expected value of xi given that xi minus 1 is equal to t. Right? And this you can write again as follows. This is at most 7/8 summation over t, probability that xi minus 1 is equal to t times t, right? And this is nothing but the expectation of xi minus 1, right? So the expectation of xi is 7/8 times the expectation of xi minus 1, right? So if you just unroll this further, right? If you unroll this recurrence further, it's like a recurrence relation of the expectations. If you unroll this, what you see is that expected value of xi is at most 7/8 to the I times expectation of x0, which is n. Right? So the expectation of xi is at most 7/8 to the I times n. Right? So if you choose I to be something like log n to the base 7/8, correct? Say it is 2 log n, for instance, you know. If you choose this, then expectation of xi, right, is at most 1/. So maybe I'll put this as 3. That's slightly better. This is how much? This is at most 1/n squared. Right? So the expectation of xi for I is equal to 3 log n to the base 7/8 is something like, is at most 1/n squared. Okay. So what was xi? Xi was the random variable that told you the length of the array where the element A was present, right, in the recursion tree. Correct? So now let's just find out what is the probability that xi is greater than 1 for I is equal to this value. This by Markov's inequality is less than or equal to expectation of xi, which is less than or equal to 1/n squared. Right? So if you fix an element A, the probability that the array size at the ith level of recursion, the array size which contains A at the ith level of recursion, the probability that it is greater than 1 is less than 1/n squared. Correct? This is for a fixed A. Right? This means that if you take the recursion tree, right, and you start with the array, which has n elements in it, and A is present somewhere, and you go down this recursion tree, then within the expected length of this recursion tree, by which time you will get a singleton here containing just A, this is something like 3 log 7/8 n. That's what this is saying. Right? If you choose I to be this value, then the probability that xi is greater than 1, which is that the length of the array containing A is greater than 1, is less than 1/n squared. Is this clear? Any questions so far? Right. So this is Markov's inequality. This is Markov with A is equal to 1. Oh, sorry, maybe I should not use this. So this is basically, yeah, this is Markov's inequality. I should write. Right. Any questions? Okay.
So
Yeah.
the base should be 8 by 7, right?
8 by 7. Sorry, not 7 by 8. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
So we just wanted a constant that didn't matter.
Which one?
Like that 8 by 7 doesn't really
Yeah,
matter.
we just needed. So this bound is basically to get that there is a constant fraction of degrees. Yeah. This is one of the bound.
okay.
Yeah.
I actually I was quick to say that T by 2, but I still don't think it. I mean, I still don't know if it is correct or not.
Which one?
The T by 2.
So
Like
I don't know.
although-
I don't know of a better analysis. I mean, the analysis that we tried to do is wrong, as Raghu was pointing out. I don't know whether it is indeed P over 2. I don't know whether that is.
No,
So
no, I was.
right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that if you consider then all the possible ways in which A could end up at array of size T,
Huh.
the position of A I thought was random. It was uniformly at random
The
among
position
all
of A.
things. Yeah.
That you cannot
Because-
assume.
Oh, because we
Array is
why
given
not?
to us.
Oh, okay. No. The array is given to us, but our choices of pivot is random.
No, that is true, but I'm saying that you might still not get a one element sized array for A, or 2 elements, 3 element sized array, for instance. Because if A might be the largest element or something. Or A might be in the middle, as Raghu was saying, A might be in the right in the middle.
So no, but you have made I minus 1 choices of some
No,
I
you have
minus-
not made I minus 1. What you've done is you've gone to I minus 1 level. At this level, there are only, you're in an array where the array containing A has size T. That's what you know. You've made I minus 1 choices, but you don't really care what that happens. But you've reached a stage where the array containing A has T elements. That's all you need. You don't need to think about what happened before. How will that help you in the analysis is not clear.
Okay.
What choices you made before. Yeah. Such a good point. So Raghu, you were saying something in between, right?
Yeah, I think like if you take the A's position as some K, then like do the analysis and then maximize over K,
Huh.
you will get that it's still less than some 3T by 4. I think I'm getting 3T by 4 plus 3 by 2.
3T by 4 plus
3 by 2.
3 by 2. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Maybe we'll see that. So you'll maximize over all possible values of K. K can go from 0 to T, right?
Yeah. I think like K equal to T by 2 will be the maximum value.
Okay. I see. So yeah, maybe we can see that. Maybe you can just share it also, right? Let's see that. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that's good. But so if you get 3 over 4 T, then what you get is a slightly better bound, right? Your running time bound gets slightly better, right? Because of this thing here, right? That's good. So we'll see that. So I don't know if I don't know I can't do the analysis right now here, but we will see that. Yeah. Just send it to me, right?
Okay, sir. Else.
Okay, just scan and send if you have written something. Yeah, that's also fine. Okay. So you can actually share it on the mailing list, CS, the randomized algorithms mailing list. That will be one better. I think
Okay,
that's
sir.
the right place. Yeah.
I'll do it.
Good. So yeah, so where are we? So yeah, so we did this. So we are here, and So for this value, what we have is the probability that xi is greater than n is 1 over n squared. And what do we need to know? You need to know what is, so ei, let ei, or rather, not ei, e sub a is the event that a appears in an array of size greater than or equal to 2 in the recursion tree. At depth 3 log n to the base 8 over 7. So let's just consider this event, right? So you have this recursion tree. What the event that we're looking at is the fact that the element A appears in an array of size greater than or equal to 2 at a depth of 3 log n to the base 8 over 7. Right? If every element finishes by that level, then what you've done is you've basically sorted the array completely. It's only when you've gone down to that depth and still there are larger arrays that you need to, again sort them, and you need to do more steps of the quicksort. Otherwise, everything stops at that level. Everyone is in a singleton array, which means that the entire array has been sorted. So this probability is what we have just bounded. This probability of EA is what you have just bounded by 1 over n square. Because what it says is that at the level 3 log n to the base 3 log n, right? The probability that the size of the array is greater than 1 is just less than 1 over n square. Right? So for a fixed A, it's unlikely to go beyond that length, beyond that level of recursion. So now what we are interested in is this probability of union of EAs for all A's. And this again by the union bound. This is nothing but summation of the probabilities of EA for all A's, which is nothing but at most 1 over n. Right? So this is again the union bound. So basically, this union bound dictates the choice of this constant here, right? This constant's choice was dictated by that union bound. For instance, if I had put 2 in there, then what I will get is something like 1 over n. And then if I do a union bound, it does not tell me anything. It will just sum up, right? So the choice of the constant there somehow is dictated by the way in which the union bound is going to be applied. Right? So that's something that usually happens. When you do this analysis, usually there'll be many union bounds. There could be many different union bounds coming in the analysis, and the choice of the constant basically depends on all these things. Right? Any questions on this so far? Right. So what we have said is, what we have shown is that the probability that the running time of quicksort, right, x, which is what we are looking at, this is greater than 3n ln 8 over 7n is at most 1 over n. So this is slightly better than what we saw before, right? Earlier, when we just applied Markov directly, we saw that this constant was bad, right? This error probability was bad. We had a constant. So now this is inverse polynomial. Right? Correct? And this will change. I mean, you can get better and better bounds depending on stronger and stronger inequalities that we can apply. And that is what we are going to see next. Right? We're going to see a different bound, and we'll see a different application. Quicksort will come again, but in a different setting maybe. But we will leave quicksort for now. We'll see a stronger bound for concentration around the expectation, and we'll see an application for that. Right? So that is what we will do in the next lecture. Okay. Any questions right now? Any clarifications? All right. So I will send a short video about the next part. So I missed the lecture yesterday, and so I'll send a short video about. I'll try to make a video for the next few. It will not be as long as a 1 hour lecture, but hopefully shorter. But I'll make a short video and I'll share it with you. Right. So Monday there is no lecture. Okay. Monday is apparently Friday's timetable. Tomorrow is a non-instructional day. Therefore, on Monday we have Friday's timetable, and so there is no lecture on Monday. We'll have the next lecture on Wednesday, but before that I'll share a small video with some additional topics that I wanted to finish, which I didn't finish. So I'll just share that also, right? And then we'll meet on Wednesday. Okay. And yeah, so the problem set, the deadline is Monday. If you want, we can talk about, if you have any doubts that you want to clarify, we can talk about it also sometime. You can always email me. I haven't given a fixed office hour, mainly because if you want to talk, you can just send me an email. We can fix up a meeting and discuss, right? If you're stuck in a problem, I said you can discuss, a couple of you can discuss if you want. But if you want to discuss with me, that is also fine, or with the TA. Sampriti is the TA, and you can discuss with her also, right? If you're stuck somewhere and you want some help, that is also possible, right? And the submission is on Monday, right? Yeah. Any other issues related to the course? Any comments or suggestions that you have? Okay, so then I think we will stop for now. So Shrikant, Keshav, and Indranil, can you just stay back for a few minutes? Yeah. So Sampriti, you can stop the recording. Yeah.